If you are tracking US news, you would already be aware of a New York Times article that came out a few days ago that talk about one of the key aims initially of the US-Israel strike on Iran. And that was to reinstate former Iranian President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad. The report details a targeted strike that looked to move him from house arrest. Of course, if you are tracking all of the different parts of the conflict and this report itself, you would know that things didn't actually go as planned. The report details that it was a failed operation, and you would remember that Iranian officials reported that Ahmadinejad had initially passed away during that strike, later to be informed that he was alive, but that he did have minor injuries. Now, he has not been seen in the public eye since around March of this year. Now, we think this piece is important because if you're watching it in Western media, mainly in the US, but also elsewhere, you would see that they position Ahmadinejad in terms of his severe anti-rhetoric regarding Israel and the US. So the discussion in terms of ideology in those countries is the fact that why would you want to reinstate somebody who has such negative and extreme views towards these two countries? So if you watch the reports on CNN and elsewhere, you would see that this is the main discussion. Now, if you've tracked the videos and discussions that Perspective South has done regarding regime change, these concepts would not be controversial or new to you in any way. We've often talked about that when regime change takes place, that the elements that come into power either create a vacuum or give rise to extremist elements in the country. You would see this historically even with Iran. So while the former Iranian president is presented in certain ways in Western media, it's also important to understand what his personality looks like to people in the country and citizens who've left the country. Residents of small towns, for instance, have always considered him a man of the people who championed the poor, provided concessions, and often visited neglected regions. There's also an element of national pride attached to him in consideration of his defiance of the West and also his promotion of the Iranian nuclear program. Among the middle and upper classes, there has been blame placed on his administration regarding mismanagement of funds and heavy oil revenue spending. There were many disputes also that took place during his re-election in 2009, which caused a lot of people to consider his administration as repressive. But what's interesting is that in recent years, he has evolved from a hardliner to an internal critic of corruption and governance issues in Iran. Another reason why this story is of specific interest to us is because of the way it's also discussed within the US. So there is certain considerations that talk about the US during the Obama administration, where they didn't want to have diplomatic ties or negotiations with Ahmadinejad because of his hardline stance. This presentation and perception of him as an anti-Western dictator. And then you fast forward and you look at his current persona as a government critic. And these are maybe some of the questions that Western media is not going into deeply enough. But if you are tracking the conflict in deeper ways, these are just some of the questions and considerations to be made. Because things aren't always black and white, and the story is always developing.